It has been an entertaining spring for me, to say the least. And I was struggling to come up with what I was going to present on today, and I was talking with my dad a couple weeks ago. And giving credit where credit is due, he said I could use this sermon of his. So my dad is the original one that put this together. And I don't remember how many years ago he put it together, but it was one of my favorite sermons that he's told before. And so I'll share it with you this morning. It was still very dark at 3:30 in the morning as Tom Fisher began pushing the propeller blades of the 1,000-horse engine around to make sure that no cylinder of the round engine was full of oil and might lock up when the starter was engaged. By the time he had finished, he was dripping wet. The temperature, 85 degrees. Today, Friday, was the only day the job could be done. 1,600 acres of potatoes to be fertilized at 100 pounds per acre. For this aircraft carrying full loads of 4,000 pounds per trip, it would take 40 trips, a very long day. The forecast was, for as pilots like to say, severe clear, sunny and clear all day long. For those of you who may not be antiquated with flying, temperature is very important to the performance of an aircraft. In designing airplanes, engineers will use what is referred to as a standard day. And that standard day is 59 degrees at 29.92 inches of mercury, barometric pressure at sea level. The aircraft wing is designed to perform best at those set conditions. As the temperature goes up and or the pressure goes down, the aircraft wing will not lift as much. For any pilots, the term density altitude would be recognized in reference to that. As Tom took off and set a course for the field, he did some calculations. The aircraft would handle 4,000 pounds in the hopper as long as the temperature did not rise more than a couple of degrees. With a clear, sunny day, that was not likely to happen. If he had to start loading less than 4,000 pounds each trip, there would be no way for the job to be finished today. Things did not look very good. Tom decided to let someone else worry about things. So as he flew, he told God what the day looked like and asked him to provide a solution. Arriving at the 2-track gravel road that was to be his airstrip for the day, Tom set the big aircraft down and taxied to the loading truck as the sky began to lighten. By the time the aircraft was loaded and the strategy mapped out, the first load lifted off just prior to the sun peeking over the horizon. With each trip, Tom would tap the outside air temperature gauge, making sure the needle was not stuck as the indicator hovered around 85 degrees. Have you ever found yourself in a situation like that? One where your experiences told you that the outcome was not going to be favorable for you. What did you do about it? Did you turn to God and let Him worry about it for you? Do you trust God with your life? All of your life, with every facet of your life? Is your God powerful enough to take care of whatever comes your way? Let's open up the Bible this morning. We're going to start in Psalms chapter 78 and verses 1 through 8. If you'll remember, our scripture reading came out of this passage. Psalm 78, 1 through 8. Give ear, O my people, to my law. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings of old, which we have heard and known, and our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from our children, showing the generations to come the praises of the Lord and his strength and his wonderful works that he hath done. For he established a testimony in Jacob and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers that they should make known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they may set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and might not be as their fathers, a stubborn, rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, whose spirit was not steadfast in God. Looking at verse 5 in there, it's saying that he established a testimony in Jacob. Thinking about that word testimony, what exactly is a testimony? We've heard it in multiple different instances before, but it's something that we can tell others about that we've experienced. So in here, Jacob has experienced something. So it's talking about this testimony that Jacob has. It's talking about laws which have been made, and there later, and he commands our fathers that they should make them known. So right there, just in one verse, we need to tell others what has happened. And moving into what our scripture reading was, that they may set their hope in God. So just a couple verses down, after we've shared that testimony, people are able to set their hope in God for what he's seen. Elder Morris Venden wanted to discover exactly what was required of a Christian. So he took a little book called Steps to Christ, and after stripping away all the phrases and slogans that church people are used to, he found that there are 3 things all Christians are expected to do. Read. Read the Bible and listen to God. Then you need to talk or pray to God. And then 3, you need to tell. Tell those around you what has happened in the first 2. And just like we read earlier, that testimony established, passing it on, you're telling others what has happened. Do you have something to tell? Is your God the same God that is found in the Bible? Let's take a few minutes and look at the power of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We're going to start out in Jonah as we look through some different stories. Jonah chapter 1, looking in verses 15 through 17. You're all fairly familiar with the story of Jonah, but we're going to read through 3 verses here, starting in 15. And they lifted Jonah up and threw him out into the sea, and the sea ceased its raging. Then the men feared Jehovah exceedingly and offered a sacrifice to Jehovah and vowed vows. And Jehovah then prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah. And Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. You know, just at the start of that little passage there, you have a storm that came up, created by God to stop someone who was running away. They didn't want to do what God was asking them to do. And God threw up a storm. And just the testimony of that storm ceasing when Jonah hit the water was enough right there for the men to fear Jehovah exceedingly and offer a sacrifice and vowed vows. But that's not all that happened in that story. God's so wonderful in what he does, he prepared a fish that would swallow a man whole, not digest him, provide enough oxygen for him to breathe, and then on command, spit him out 3 days later at a specified place and time. I think there's sometimes God's just showing off at what he can do. But if we move a few chapters down in Jonah, going to chapter 4, verses 6 through 11, we continue reading more of the story here. And God prepared a plant, and it came up over Jonah to be shade over his head, in order to deliver him from his misery. And Jonah rejoiced with great joy over the plant. But God prepared a worm as the morning dew dawned the next day. And it struck the plant, and it withered. And it happened when the sun shone, God ordained a scorching east wind, and the sun beat on the head of Jonah so that he fainted. And he asked for his life to die, and he said, "Better is my death than my life." And God said to Jonah, "Is your anger rightly kindled over the plant?" And he said, "My anger is rightly kindled even to death." And Jehovah said, "You have pity on the plant for which you had not labored nor made it grow, which was a son of a night, and perished the son of a night. And so I do not spare Nineveh, the great city, in which are more than 120,000 men who do not know between their right and their left hand, beside much cattle." Through that whole encounter between Jonah and God, God commanded a plant to grow, giving shade, and then he commanded a worm to eat the plant just to make a point to Jonah. Sometimes it's the little things that get overlooked. What a wonderful God we're seeing in the Bible. If we continue on to our next story this morning, found in Joshua 10, verses 12 through 14, says, "Then Joshua spoke to Jehovah in the day when Jehovah delivered up all the Ammonites before the sons of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, 'Sun, stand still on Gibeon, and moon, stand still in the valley of Ajalon.' And the sun stood still, and the moon stood still, until the people had avenged themselves on their enemy. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? And the sun stood still in the midst of the heaven, and did not hasten to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that Jehovah listened to the voice of men, for Jehovah fought for Israel." If we take our modern understanding of science and apply it to that story, God is so powerful, he stopped the earth's rotation. Talk about slamming on the brakes. The amount of mass there, and he just said, "Okay, you want the sun to stand still? We'll stop the earth, and you can deal with what needs to be dealt with." But let's go on to the next story. In Isaiah 38, verses 5 through 8, "Go and say to Hezekiah, 'So says Jehovah, the God of David your father, I have heard your prayer, I have seen your tears. Behold, I will add to your days 15 years, and I will deliver you and this city out of the hand of King Assyria, and I will defend this city. And this shall be a sign to you from Jehovah, that Jehovah will do this thing that he spoke. And behold, I will bring again the shadow of the steps which has gone down in the sundial of Hazah 10 steps backwards, so the sun returned 10 steps by which it has gone down." In the last story, God stopped the earth's rotation And this one, he not only stopped it, but he turned it backwards 10 steps. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that we find in the Bible. What wondrous power he has. If we go to Numbers chapter 20, verses 6 through 12. And Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they fell upon their faces, and the glory of Jehovah appeared to them. And Jehovah spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod and gather the assembly, you and Aaron your brother, and speak to the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth its water, and you shall bring forth to them water out of the rock, so you shall give the congregation and their animals drink. And Moses took the rod from Jehovah as he commanded him, and Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock and said to them, Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out of this rock? And Moses lifted his hand with the rod and struck the rock twice, and water came out plentifully, and the congregation and their animals drank. And Jehovah spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me to sanctify me in the eyes of the sons of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this congregation into the land which I have given them. You know, in there, even though Moses did not follow the exact instructions, God knew that the people needed water. And out of a rock, he provided water. And what does it say? It wasn't just a little water, and the water came out plentifully. I've never seen a rock just start erupting water out of it. But God did it. And he provided water for everyone, all the people and all their flocks. God takes care. We're going to take a look in Job as we wrap up our walk through the Bible. Job chapter 9, verses 4 through 10. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has hardened himself against him and been blessed? He who removes the mountains, and they know it not. He who overturns them in his anger. He who shakes the earth out of its place, and the pillars of it tremble. The one who, speaking to the sun, and it does not rise, and seals up the stars. He alone stretches out the heavens and walks on the waves of the sea. Who made the bear Orion and Pleiades and the chambers of the south. Who is doing great things past finding out, ye marvelous things without number. Job's talking about God in there. All the things he has done. Are we starting to get a little better picture of the God of the Bible here? The immense power. Yet there's something strange with the human condition. The longer we're around something, the more something happens, we start becoming immune to it. Things may happen in our lives, and the first time we say, oh, that's wonderful, and then it happens again, and we brush it off, and pretty soon we just expect it to happen, and we just don't see it anymore. Take, for example, what happened at Jesus' crucifixion. You have a religious system that is celebrating the substitution of the promised sacrifice, while at the same time killing that promised sacrifice for the good of the nation. Did you catch that? They're celebrating this promised sacrifice yet to come, and yet they've gotten so caught up in their ways and immune to what's going on that they're killing what they were waiting for. The high priest, who is a type of Christ, is the one condemning Jesus to death for blasphemy against God, while a Roman soldier who has seen hundreds of men die proclaims, "Surely this was the Son of God." Where are you today? Have you become immune to God's activities in your life? Or do you recognize who He is and what He is doing and what He wants to do for you? Can your God do for you? What will your God do for you? The sun climbed higher into the sky, and yet with each load, the outside air temperature gauge kept hovering at 85 degrees. 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, noon, still 85 degrees. And Tom was still able to take 4,000-pound loads in his airplane. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and still that outside air temperature gauge was at 85 degrees. Now Tom was counting down the loads. Only 6 more to go. Now 4, 3, 2. The last of the fertilizer dropped away from the aircraft. Tom pulled up out of the field and looked at his outside air temperature gauge and watched the needle spiral right up to 106 degrees. That evening, the high reported in a town not less than 10 miles from where Tom was working was 117 degrees. There were no weather fronts in the state. You might explain what might have happened in several ways, but Tom and I choose to believe that the God we serve is a mighty God. Read the Bible and see what God has for you. Talk to Him, pray to Him, and then tell everybody else what God has done for you.